Report from Superintendent Jon Fernandez. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Bree, and good morning, Chris. I see what you did there with our progress report. So,
I'm loving the wordplay. I'm guessing that English was your best subject, Bree.
yeah, that was good. But no, I mean, we're happy to come on and every week and try to give updates to the community. It was really strange. We talked with our management team. We've been to a couple of parent stakeholder meetings, and then we turned around and said, we is there a way to be too transparent? Because we've been going and talking, with the media, with our parents, with our stakeholders as much as we can, because it's just such an important decision. So, again, we're still in the mode of planning for potential reopening, and we are still targeting January, just as a date that we can work backwards from to make sure that everything is in place in the event that we're able to open. But most importantly, we try to make sure in these, especially in these parent outreach meetings that we're doing this week, we've been through two of them and we have three more to go. We wanted to make sure that the message got out there clearly, so if you're out there talking to fellow parents, other teachers, other, members of the community, the message is that we are preparing because we need to be ready to go whenever it is safe to do so. But ultimately, it has to be safe enough in the community to be able to go back. And every day we track the numbers that are coming out of the Joint Information Center. And every day we plug them into our dashboard to see where we are on the high risk scale. And we are still, off the charts in terms of being in the highest risk category for new cases, and because of and due to the positivity rate. And so even if we see maybe a couple of days where the numbers seem a little lower than before, the dashboard that we look at takes a look at the past 2 weeks to make sure we're not just making decisions based on one day we're up, one day we're down, but how are we doing over a 14-day period? And that comes from the guidance from the Centers for Disease Control in terms of how they look at the data as well. So we're tracking that. We're trying to make sure that we don't do anything drastically different from the CAR score that was recently released. We're trying to make sure we're kind of in the same direction in terms of the types of information we pushed out there. But ultimately, we told our stakeholders that the first thing we look at is that the safety dashboard. Are we in a position as a community to open? Hopefully, we can be in that lower to lowest risk category before we start to say, okay, now how are we going to bring back our teachers and students for face-to-face instruction? So, we have about less than a month to go before we make a final decision about next semester, and we'll be monitoring the situation. But as I said last week, it's kind of tough to be talking about reopening when the numbers are going in the wrong direction. And I know that last week's numbers were really driven by a couple of those situations at the barracks. And so we understand that was a real jump in the numbers and may not be reflective of the entire community, but it certainly didn't do us any good, because when you take a look at the big picture, we were still in a high risk situation without the barracks, situation. So again, we're in constant communication with the governor's office. Lieutenant Governor meets with me weekly, and so yesterday we met with the public health team just to go over what we're doing and how we're preparing. And again, I think we're on the same page that we are targeting we want our kids back at some point, but it really is going to depend on our ability to have the overall community health situation in a better state. So again, we just kind of join everybody in encouraging the proper mask wearing, and try to stay home as much as possible and try to limit and prevent the further spread of COVID-19. But alongside that, at the same time, we always have to plan. We don't there's no way that if things get better and the governor says go ahead and open, we're not going to be able to turn around in a couple of days and get open if we haven't put everything in place. So we meet frequently as planning committees. This week we are having our stakeholder meetings on Zoom and on Facebook Live every evening this week at 5:30 p.m. and we go for about an hour and a half. And we make a short presentation, probably for the first 20 to 30 minutes, And then the rest of it is really dedicated to answering questions and concerns. In fact, we have a couple of my deputies have created something called the after party. So after the Zoom meetings are done, they stay on for about 15 minutes afterwards for anyone who might have felt shy about asking questions in front of everybody else. So we welcome everybody to join that after party and ask any questions that they felt still needed to be answered. So we'll be doing that, and we welcome. We're doing it by region, and then on Friday it's a dedicated session for our families of kids with disabilities. But we welcome anybody to join. It's the same link, for every day. We had just divided it up by region, and then for our special education families. But you're welcome. Everyone's welcome to join, or you can watch it later on Facebook Live. There are some developments, and I think as part of the preparation, I think it's always come up the issue about technology, pushing out the technology and so forth. So as of today, we're getting closer to about 4,000 applications for laptops. So we're going to continue to push laptops out. Remember, we were targeting, thinking it might be around 8,000, and that number came in lower for our secondary students. So we're pushing it to about 4,000 applications, as of this week. And we'll continue to make that outreach. But we also have communicated, so this is for all of our elementary school parents, the instructions have gone out to all of our elementary schools to begin the distribution and collection of applications for laptops for our younger children, our elementary school children, even though we don't expect those to come into maybe late December, in time for second semester. We're in the process of going ahead and getting those applications in, so that once those those pieces are delivered and distributed, we can get them out to the kids. So if you're a parent in the elementary school and you've been watching us and saying, hey, why are they giving it out to secondary students and they have all these extra laptops? Are we going to do elementary? The answer is yes. Please contact your school if you haven't been contacted already. They are preparing to send out the applications, turn it in, and request for that support. And then within a month's time, we should hear more about the timing for distribution of the laptops. With regard to the internet, we've been working on this with the governor's office. We are, I think, maybe a couple sentences away from being completely done with the procurement documents. So, we wanted to be ready to go when we got the final approval and the drawdown of the funds from US GDOE to the governor's office. So we're in a good position with regard to getting ready to publish a solicitation so that vendors can compete to offer those services. But we still need to await the money to be drawn down by our by the front office so that we can issue that procurement. So we're working with them to get that out there, and we've been targeting to get that done and by the end of this calendar year. So that's still our goal. I think, and then the other thing to look forward to is that we did talk about this idea of community learning centers. So in addition to getting laptops out and trying to help those who require home internet access, we also wanted to provide a support at the school sites by helping to upgrade the internet in certain parts of the school, like the cafeterias, the libraries, the gyms, even in certain schools, the parking lots, and to put the necessary equipment in, including laptops to be available, printers to be available for those students who were able to make use of that type of support, which is basically kind of an after hours support at the school. We would open the school, open these facilities, provide a couple of personnel to help supervise, and then those who would be interested, want to welcome them to come to these community learning centers near their homes and be able to make use of those supports. So our intent is, by the end of December, we're looking at opening 5 to 10 of them as our first phase. We have to go to public health to ensure that, whatever the safety requirements are that need to be in place are in place. But we've got about 5 to 10 sites around the island that are eager to open and provide that support. And then we want to see if that's something that the community will make use of before we go further. So those are the kind of the updates on expanding access to technology and the internet. When we come back if we come back in January, we still plan to offer, the 3 models of learning, especially if we're able to do face-to-face. So all 3 we would seek to keep implementing, and we still plan to give the parents the choice. So we're not going to say, hey, you got to go no matter what. I think at this point the intent is to allow them to register for the model that they prefer, see where we are with the numbers of registrations that come in, and then if we're able to do so in January, offer all three models of learning. I know that earlier we floated this idea of ending or phasing out the hard copy model. And I just want everyone to know, because we got a lot of feedback from that. People say, no, you got to keep this. We like it. We like the way it works. So we recognize that there are strengths to the hard copy model of learning, but there are also many challenges in terms of the distribution, the collection, the lack of frequent teacher interaction and so forth. So I think the decision that we've made is that at some point we do plan to phase it out, but we don't plan to do so immediately. I think we want to focus on expanding our online option. Let's go through the school year and see what we can do to make sure that the technology support is in place, and then see what we can learn from the hard copy model in terms of its strengths, so we can incorporate that into the online platform before we talk about phasing it out. But again, we told our parents the last couple of days, don't worry, we're not going to tell you on a Friday that Monday is we're going to be shutting it down and you're going to have to go online. It'll be a longer process than that. And so I just wanted to reassure those families I didn't expect so much blowback, but we got a lot of concerns out there. Some of it was related to internet access. I don't have a laptop, and we understand that. So that's why we're focused on that. But others were like, well, we just need it. Good valid points. Someone said we have a kindergarteners. We like them to be on hard copy materials. We have students who want to practice their writing, so we need hard copy. So there are things that we need to think about, maintaining. But at the end of the day, we do think that we will end up eventually being an either online or face-to-face model. But that's not going to happen in January. So just ask our parents to just kind of keep monitoring it with us. But we'll make those announcements much later when it comes time to have that discussion. Right. So I can stop there and answer any questions you guys have about where we are.
We had the Lieutenant Governor on yesterday, actually, and he mentioned this $8 million in U.S. Department of Education funding to go to these expanded community learning centers to provide internet access. But he also mentioned subsidies. Do you have any idea if you could explain that a little bit more about these subsidies?
So in addition to the community learning centers, I think, let me just clarify that DOE, is working on our school facilities as those community learning centers, but there was also interest in coordinating with the governor because of the community centers that DYA has, the libraries and other entities that could serve as well as the same kind of resource in the community. So we've been working to make sure we kind of plan together and, try to offer the same level of support. So they do plan to do that on their side with those government agencies and potentially with the mayor's offices or facilities as well. We're kind of working with them to see what their needs are. But with regard to the home internet access, what we plan to do is basically solicit, proposals or solicit offers to provide internet access at home. We believe it'll likely be those devices, your kind of hotspot devices that you can have at home that will help connect maybe 4 or 5 users at a time. I've heard up to 10 users at a time, but it should be able to serve a normal household. And then those devices would they normally come at a monthly subscription price. So for those families who are eligible and receive that device, the funding that's been set aside will be going to pay directly for those services. So again, it won't be for handing it out to just every family, at least for DOE. What we plan to do is we do want to set some parameters for those who are definitely in need. And so we are looking at for those who are already participating in some of those programs that exist like SNAP and so forth will be eligible. And obviously we have enough. We will definitely work to push those out. So we don't, that's our plan. I think for the private schools and charter schools who are able to also avail themselves of the same, supports, they can set their own criteria for how they distribute those devices as well. I just want to say something that we had to kind of decide on. Might be bad news for some of our families who were looking forward to this, is that as part of this, we are, it's not going to be one of those devices that you get and now you can just access everything on the internet, right? So obviously we want to put in filters to make sure that you're not able to, access inappropriate sites. And then, of course, we also are not going to be able to utilize these for, for Netflix streaming and things like that. That will just kind of use up all your data, and then you can't get your work done, right? So we did have to make some hard decisions. I mean, I want our kids to know I pushed very hard to ask our team whether there was anything educational that we could argue for regarding Netflix or Hulu, and they said, well, probably not a good idea to open that box. So, so that should really help ensure that, with the limited resources, we're not just having it go out there to be used for purposes for which it wasn't intended. And that'll help us with US GDOE to show that these resources are going where they need to be going.
Yeah, John, it's Jason. And first of all, kudos to you. I mean, that is an amazing concept that you're doing, and your collaboration with your federal counterpart and with the governor's office and everything like that. As someone who has dedicated his life to working to help people get the most out of technology, I mean, it's always irked me how the internet and access to online resources has always been either this, in the early days, it was like this haven for those of us who would be nerds just to like hang out, and then it became this big luxury item and this commodity that only, people of means could afford. But I mean, it truly has become, and brought forth by the pandemic, it really is utility now, just as important as water and power. And I was going to say, when you said that thing about like Netflix, if you just hold your ear up and everything, and maybe just listen outside your house, you heard like about 10,000 kids be like, "Oh man!" but that is a fantastic idea. I think the fact that you are working to deploy internet, and that's going to be my question in a sec, but you're doing this, and you're doing this for families that typically could not afford that. You're doing that at no cost to them, and you're also applying quality measures to make sure that kids use it the right way, and we're not just giving kids free reign bandwidth on a broadband level. Is fantastic. But I wanted to ask you, you were mentioning the fact that there are between 5 to 10 of these learning centers that you're looking at right now. Are you at liberty to break down exactly how those sites will be chosen? Are they by particular schools based on large population, or is it regional, or is it at the village level?
We'll finalize, those details and announce it when we're ready. But really, what we're looking at is there are some schools out there that are just raring to go. So it's one of those situations where some schools say, hey, we need additional upgrades and lighting and equipment before we can open up. And there are some schools that say, hey, we're ready whenever you call. So we're trying to finalize that list. We're still working with those schools, but we believe that just based on our last meetings, there are about 5 to 10 who are saying, hey, if you got to open, we're ready, we're able, we're willing to go. And, obviously we're going to try to make sure we have coverage, in various parts of the island. Eventually we will, when we expand to the full, the full network of these learning centers. But right now, it's one of those things where we have schools who are willing to pilot and go out there and open up to see if this is actually a viable concept. I guess the idea is, if nobody comes, let's not go ahead and start to open up the rest of them unless there's, we can establish demand. Otherwise, we're just, opening the facilities and we find that it's not going to be of use. Then we don't want to, over do it with opening multiple sites. We can concentrate them where there is demand, and if not, work to see what other solutions might be more appropriate.
Yeah, but the fact that you have now, decentralized the ability for kids to have access to technology, both on a hardware and the infrastructure level, I mean, that's such a huge step forward for public education on Guam and everything like that. So as someone who really loves tech, I can't thank you enough. That's a massive, massive win for GDOE and for Guam in general.
Well, I think you guys have touched on this overall theme here, really, which is this: the pandemic has really shown a light. It's shown a light on a lot of the issues of access to services, inequity in the distribution of services. And so when it comes to the internet, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to food support, we're seeing that in the community, right? We put together a plan to try to address as many as possible. But then after you do that, people say, well, what about this? We've got a whole area, a whole pocket of a village where there's just no, we don't have the running water, we don't have the transportation. How are you going to provide a support that's going to tailor it? So you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming to light, especially because of the pandemic, and a lot of those issues relate to some of the basic supports that we need to provide to families. So that's absolutely true.
Okay, I do have one more question. I know Bree's got a couple, but I wanted to ask something I didn't unfortunately get the time to ask you last week, but maybe thinking of a best case scenario, as you were kind of alluding to last week, if we do have that return at some point to face-to-face learning, is there possibly an opportunity where you'll be augmenting the faculty with it? Will you be calling back like more substitute teachers, or will there be a open call to actually have more subs? Because I'm just thinking, with teachers maybe in the public school system having maybe a 1 to 25, 1 to 30 ratio, and with a lot of teachers admittedly being parents themselves, there are going to be those cases, especially with the pandemic still being around, where, maybe I'm a little hoarse or I have a scratchy throat. I don't want to take the risk of infecting my students, or, I want to do the smart thing. So you'll have a lot of teachers who may not be able to show up for, maybe 2 or 3 days, whereas normally you just take like one sick day and then you're good. So I would assume the need for substitute teachers would be big, and certainly this is something you've considered.
Yeah, so when I did say that I'd be willing to answer that question, but the only answer I have right now is that it's absolutely one of those things that we're kind of struggling with to make sure we have make a decision about how to handle the issues. So I guess what I would say, further along those lines is, when we were in July, remember we were doing this reopening, this planning process as well.
Sure.
But remember back then, the numbers were so low. We were in a low single-digit positivity rates. The numbers were coming in very, it's just small, minuscule numbers of new cases. So when we were heading into the potential opening of the school year, most of the focus and most of the questions and concerns were about operations, right? How is the buses going to work? Are they going to get face masks? And some of those basic, supply type of discussions. Now that we're having this discussion heading into a potential, January date, a lot of the issues coming up are now personnel issues, right? How much leave can someone take when they get infected? How is contact tracing going to work? When will schools be shut down? How many teachers are actually going to be willing to come back in this environment? Back in July was different, and back in July we still had about 40% of our families wanting to go face to face. I think a lot of it's going to depend on how many families feel comfortable today in sending their kids back, as early as January. And then when we look to the teachers and the staff, I know there are going to be concerns there because we're already hearing it as part of our discussions. I'm in a high risk situation. I live with my mother who is older and sickly. So many different scenarios where teachers are already starting to think about, what types of leeway, flexibility, accommodations will there be already, much less when when somebody has to unexpectedly not be able to conduct class, right? So already from the beginning, there's this question about what are we going to do if our teachers don't feel comfortable returning and they have valid reasons. And so right now we're in the middle of, it's really been amazing because I think most of our efforts right now are focused on the personnel issues. How do we deal with our workforce for whom we want to be understanding and accommodating, and we can deal with normally on a case-by-case basis. But if it's a very large group, majority or so of the teachers who feel this way, how do we manage that? Because like you said, if we need to be face-to-face, we're going to have a teacher in the classroom. And just getting them back, and figuring out how to support them with substitutes in case, things happen at the school. That's something we're working through right now because, again, it's just amazing how you can take the discussion from a few months ago to today, and nobody asks about operations anymore. They understand, you got face masks, you got temperature scans, you got social distancing, cleaning supplies. But, will there still, will people have to take leave when they get sick? Because, some of us have already gone through that situation. Will there be substitutes? What about for the online, platform and so forth? So it's actually, that's probably a more complex set of issues that we have to deal with. So we're working on it. And again, we have about 3 more weeks to kind of solidify our recommendations and then let people know how we're going to operate.
And for those students who are really concerned, and they've always been, they always shoot for perfect attendance and everything like that. You're going to make sure that those kids can hopefully, if you can't make it face to face, then they can still go to school online. So your perfect attendance record, kids, will be intact. The soup said so.
Absolutely, and again, we don't know how many of those kids feel comfortable going back to school, and we certainly wanted our parents to have the first say. Let us know how many of you feel comfortable first before we start planning for face-to-face. I just can't see a scenario in which we say to a parent, you're going no matter what. Mm-hmm. You're going back to the school facility, whether you feel confident or not, because, as a parent myself, you got to make that determination. Am I going to put my kids at risk, not feeling safe? Or am I just going to defy this requirement and keep them home? And so we have a lot of parents in that situation. And our effort right now is just to kind of offer the information, let them know how we're going through this discussion, this decision-making process, let them know how we're monitoring the safety and health situation and how we plan to mitigate those risks should their kids return to school. I don't envision, returning everybody to school. Definitely, if we do go back face-to-face, it's going to be, a much lower numbers like we were talking about back in August, much lower numbers on a day-to-day basis. That'll help us to, allow for social distancing, practice, safe hygiene, wear the face mask. It's not going to be, what you would normally envision as a regular school day. So we haven't gotten to that point yet, but we plan to, keep preparing and planning so that when that day comes, we're ready to go.
All right. Thanks, Jon.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the stakeholder meetings. I know that they continue today, as you mentioned earlier, at 5:30. But you also mentioned that 2 stakeholder meetings have already been held for Lagu and the Lutsen districts. Based on those stakeholder meetings that you had, what were some of the concerns and maybe even suggestions that were brought up?
Well, I think we were successful in just communicating, first of all, that this is not a decision that has already been made, and it's not a decision that is going to be made without consideration for the overall safety. I think that was something we just led off with that and said, please, let's help get this message out to all of because that's what we normally hear. How dare you say we're going back in January when the numbers are going high? And said, that's not what we're saying. There were a lot of, there were some questions, a lot, just to kind of go back to the operations side, where they were asking a lot about making sure that every school was prepared and had their plans in place versus this district wide. Hey, this is how it's going to be at every school. They wanted to make sure that we were looking at the details for every school. The different types of schools that we have out there. They all have different risks or layouts. So then we had some questions about will every school be prepared? Will every school have the supplies? What about, we had a question about Simon Sanchez in particular, if there's a school with no circulation, air circulation, what extra, measures are you going to take? So we were able to focus in on some of the school, particular school areas that people cared about. But a lot had to do also with the models of learning. I think we could really tell that parents were really, think grateful that they're still going to have the option, and really were in the, I think, in the midst of, considering where they might want to their kids to be in January under the current circumstances. So we had a lot of questions about, hey, I registered for face-to-face back in August, and I know we can't do it, but is there any way I can change that just in case I want to change that? I said, we said we let them know that we're not going to take the old data and just apply it to the new, to January. What we want to do is re-register, just get everybody back. If you want to stay in your current model of learning, you can stay. If not, make sure you affirm those decisions again, or make those decisions known through our registration process, so that, if you said face-to-face, but now you just don't feel so sure, we're not going to force you to stick to your, to stick to your original decision back in July when things looked much different from where we were today. So I think we had a lot of discussion about that, a lot of discussion about the hard copy model of learning and having that continue, discussion about the technology and the timing of that. So it really seemed like that people had heard enough about the actual safety and practices that we're planning for GDOE, and we're kind of looking at the models of learning and their options, should we decide to reopen. So again, that's the message to our parents. We are stoked.